Hi everyone, it's me. So I have a proposition for you, and it's one that I think you will find interesting. Let me turn my music down. So I propose that the United States of America, as designed, is an unstable, unmanageably large enterprise, failing, in fact. And this is unavoidable and true facts, I would think evident and obvious to all. And I propose that going back to America's literal and original roots might be the only thing that can preserve it. In other words, yes, going back to the crown is sort of like an independent arbiter that can help America sort itself out when things inevitably collapse, and I think they will. No republic, none whatsoever, at any point in human history, lasts over 500 years. They all fall apart, and for the same several reasons. The first reason, the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of the few at the expense of the many, without any feeling of responsibility on the part of the few for the many. Second, the conflict of liberties, which I didn't understand until COVID-19, and several others. And so, I don't believe that the exacerbation and the capitalization of problems politically is going to lead anywhere good. In fact, I think it'll lead to your ultimate end. And because I think you'll find that, surprise, surprise, you cannot create anything new amongst yourselves. That's not a passing trend of the moment that you're trying to capitalize on, but much like the shifting sands of a desert, to build a solid foundation on that is rather impossible because they keep shifting underneath you. All your politicians seem to do is seek to advantage themselves upon popular opinion. And popular opinion does not a lasting foundation make. It's predicated on temporary, that which is fleeting, and therefore that which never lasts. But in contrast to that temporary principle, the crown, however, is an eternal principle, predicated on that which sustains, that which endures. Foundations built to last aeons, not a couple of hundred years. One can govern, in fact, without bias, without the ability to be influenced by private or public or political self-interest, and which can't really be bought and sold to the highest bidder or the biggest corporate power broker that you happen to have in the room. I mean, come on, what are you really going to bribe Queen Elizabeth with that she doesn't already have? As the collapse of America seems to be on the horizon and worsens by the day, and has shown absolutely no signs of lessening or getting better, either under the most recent president and his administration, or the one before him, or the one before him, when it all got started, it seems, the American implosion has, in truth, it seems, been on sort of a slow cook for over 2 decades. And it's escalated steadily and with constancy. But to say that I'm a monarchist in any conversation is essentially having people tell me to go back to my D&D game. But I don't think that they understand that despite being the junior between the two philosophies by about 900 years, over 1,000 years, who's keeping track though, and despite being the far less stable of the two, that's democracy that is, and with a far shorter lifespan, generally, now that you're sort of discovering what the Romans discovered in their republic, which, just like America, is only about to last about 250 years, and as the Spartans and the Athenians discovered before you, that monarchy and benevolent autocracy is not only coming as an inevitability by necessity, it's already here, and the ideas of it have already begun to take root right underneath your noses, and you all missed it. Because you're so politically divided that you've come to hate your neighbors, and that's not cool. It's become almost sport for you. To participate in politics is now an adrenaline high for you, a sport that you take way too seriously, like an English football match, but one in which the already rowdy and fight-prone crowds of supporters between the two teams have each taken steroids, have drunk all the coffee in Seattle, on top of a bunch of crystal meth, and snorting a bunch of hot rails of delightful mixtures of cocaine and bath salts, bleach, and pop rocks combined and collectively before screaming and shouting and getting violent with one another and their immediate surroundings and anyone who disagrees with them or attempts to stop them or asks them to, hey, could you please calm down? And as I discovered, as I'm not a voter, that not even participating in that system, I was told by someone that actually meant that I was tacitly participating in that system in the last election, even though that's an absurdity. Moreover to that voter, my impartiality, my non-participation not only meant that I was somehow participating, but that I also actually took a side in that conflict, even though I wasn't participating in it. Because I could have voted, but didn't vote, which meant that I was, of course, helping the other guy win. And conversations with other people would say I was helping the other guy win. They can't really determine who my non-participation is actually helping, because it doesn't. I'm impartial. I'm above the contest. Someone told me I was a monster, that I was complicit with Trump, another with Biden, which meant that all the officers in the Capitol who died on January 6th, their blood is on my hands. I'm a monster because I didn't vote. I'm sorry, I prefer to have greater influence than the 1 out of 300 million power cut share and the power share of that power that you guys are all cool with, amalgamating yourselves together with. I prefer to just have more power singularly on my own without having to participate in your pyramid scheme. But, tell that as you might, you can't make sense to people who have lost their senses. So one can understand how they might have actually missed a comeback of monarchy, slowly and very quietly standing up in their own backyard again, because they've been beating each other over the head at least for the past 7 years, politically speaking, and yet, given all of that, one can also simultaneously not understand how they didn't see a comeback of monarchy coming. Look at the situation that they're in. I honestly don't know how some of them haven't seen it coming from 100 miles away, because it's already arrived. Not only, as the Romans realized, is it going to take one person, and one person, who is politically impartial and who can direct the affairs of state without partisanry or the electoral need to repay supporters at the detriment of opposition, but one that is also an established power, one that offers stability, constancy, gravitas, and that is trusted by the general public. And the Crown is the only established institution that can, as an unbiased friend to the American people, with purity of intention and expectation, step up and help America sort itself out. Either before or more likely after, the American civil government eventually will collapse, and it will. And so, in any case, as you have seen with the unrest recently that has gripped every sector of the American population and has steadily increased and escalated and grown in intensity and frequency of occurrence over the past decade, something like an imposition of martial law, for instance, would not go over very well with the population. And, in fact, it will have to be a civilian organization. But then again, a committee won't work in America. Neither will a Congress. Neither will a provisional government made up of or by Americans. And neither will any American philanthropist or businessman or company. Sorry, Elon Musk, but you get to get sidelined, who all have the interests that influence them, taint them, and everything that they're trying to do. It would have to be a purely philosophical reconstitutionalization of America to account for the court cases that are going to come up with COVID-19. Because, I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer, but inalienable means inalienable. And your inferiors just gave you an order, and contrary to your inalienable rights, and you followed it in America. You have to reconstitutionalize now, because now your constitution is not true. And you are not legally bound to that which is not true. Because that which is not true, no matter what it is not legally binding. And that is absolute. And so, the American tendency is to put so many qualifiers on assistance in, say, a crisis, and bars for people to meet, and standards, and mandatory minimums, and things like that, that they are going to screw this up unmanageably, inevitably, and it will end in disaster. Add in the American tendency toward the mistrust of government due to its nature, essentially one where private interests can influence elections with as much money as they want, with absolutely no oversight whatsoever, and you have an American crisis that is only going to end in ruin. Bill Clinton, your president, was in fact incorrect when he said that there's nothing wrong with America that can be cured by America. Or can't be cured by America, rather. The American people have never actually shown a tendency to behave outside of their expected patterns of response. And so, faced now with an inevitable reconstitutionalization and reformation, or the unavoidable consequence of either dissolution or disintegration inevitably, or reduction, which will be radical and different than what they had before by virtue of necessity and prerequisite requirement, lest the country itself fall into complete and total ruin, every option to do that and implement that reformation that comes from America itself will, in fact, fail. And I'm not sure why I'm the crazy one for suggesting that we go back to the original government of the United States of America, even just for help, the Crown. And even if just in an advisory capacity, as a friend, helping a friend in need, in a crisis, to avoid an imminent and unavoidable disaster. In fact, the Crown is the only entity on Earth, short of divine intervention direct, that can save America from itself. You know, I lived in the present too. But why the crown? Why monarchy? Well, reporting in for 98.9% of the span of human history, the clear winner in any contest, with its contenders in the opposition being aristocracy and democracy running in distant second and third places, both of which usually get off to promising starts only to end up in shipwreck after only a couple of centuries. Hello Rome, hello America. But the royalists, on the other hand, have won and continue to win preservations and restorations wherever they are or were. Kingship is in fact the longest continuing and the most enduring and stable of all government. It is attested to during virtually every era and every continent throughout human history, and the tendency is for it to become more common, not less. And once established, kingship is the least divisive. This is easily evinced by the rear-view mirror effect, in which you might be blinded by the present a bit, and it may appear further back in history than it actually is. But truth be told, it's still not yet cleared your blind spot. Notwithstanding the moral reprehensibility at the prospect of public beheadings, like in France, to say nothing of the insanity of, I think, basing modern governments on the ideas of the beheaders, it actually took extraordinary legal acrobatics and gymnastics, and a lot of grasping at straws, to be able to legally execute Charles I and Louis XVI on the part of the revolutionaries. They were really bullshitting on that one. Simply killing a royal family, which is reprehensible, let us be clear, and never acceptable in any circumstance, as with the Tsars in Russia, leaves one much like that left them with the Soviet Union, which had to be overthrown, couldn't be overthrown until it eventually collapsed, leaving you with the Russian Federation and the Putinists today. Instead of just going back to the only legitimate government after the Soviet Union collapsed, the Romanov family and the Imperial Russia, you went with more democracy and republicanism. And now look at Ukraine. So it seemingly burdens you forever, perhaps in apparency, with czars by election, chosen at the pre-selection, of course, always, inevitably, by the powerful or the wealthy or the networked and connected, who fill the vacuum that was once left that was left behind by the nobility, that once checked their pecuniary greed and their ambitions, and at the electoral mercy of the level of the general intelligence of the area that you happen to live in, and the compassion level of your neighbors. I hope you live in a nice place, with no qualification but age being necessary to decide your fate, for whatever reason they like. I saw Goody Proctor with the devil. Which. Someone grabbed the marshmallows. Even today, it seems no coincidence that the only regimes that are almost completely untouched by, say, the 2011 Arab Revolt or Arab Spring Revolt are those with long-standing monarchies already. And even when kings are deposed, the legal and the political framework of monarchy tends to live on, as evidenced by the fact that most modern states are founded, that are republics anyway, on the curiously contradictory, and I would even argue impossible to actually legally exist, but let's roll with it for a second, popular sovereignty. Used very, very, very loosely, because it really is, there's no such thing as popular sovereignty. Sorry. But according to that ridiculous theory, that the power once held by kings still exists, it's just now displaced onto an entity called the people and split 300 million ways. That's why I don't vote, everybody. That's a power cut. One unanticipated side effect of European colonial empires and imperialism and colonialism is that this notion of sovereignty has become the basis of constitutional orders everywhere, including in the United States of America. The only partial exceptions being a few places like Nepal or Saudi Arabia, for instance, which had monarchies of their own already. Therefore, it follows that any theory of political life that does not take account of this, or dismisses or discounts monarchy or treats kingship as some sort of marginal or exceptional or secondary phenomenon is not a very good theory, is it? Indeed, whether it is in France or India or even in America, to deny the power and the endurance and the resilience of the crown is in fact a dangerous mistake. It is a greater mistake for Democrats and Republicans, lowercase d and r for both, to assume kingship just to be history. It would enlighten and educate their bureaucrats to know more of human nature. There is a myriad of reasons kings have endured since creation, and why all agreeable and ethical consensus by popularity contest has not, despite repeated attempts, ever had a long shelf life. I can't imagine why. Basing government and the divvying out of power in a petty popularity contest, that's just, well, call me crazy, that just seems weird to me. It would shock American Democrats and Republicans alike in equal measure to learn how they presently embody democracy's and republicanism's most potent and patent evils, those of demagoguery, and the fleeting and false temporary exaltation of the caprice of any given moment. The very same qualities for which their country mistook in colonial government and fired the first shot in rebellion. And it is for that reason that even the Titanic United States is not impervious to an eventual and successful crown restoration. To deny that possibility is to deny reality itself, history, human nature, common sense, and to be so blinded by your own self-projected image of patriotism and ideationalism that you will fail to see yourselves falling apart as anyone else with eyes to see can see you are. It is self-delusion and ignorance to the point of intoleration to assume yourselves so unsinkable or unquestionably superior as this form of government when you comparatively are still yet so young. You're like a myopic child who doesn't understand why he can't drive the car at 7 years old and wonders why adults are so dumb. After all, he knows more than they do, don't they? Stupid adults. Much of the information that you have heard here today comes from several books, primary among them being On Kings, Chapter 1, especially, in the introduction, and Chapters 7 and 5, The Theses on Kingship, by David Graeber and Marshall Salling, which is an incredibly compelling read. I really, really love these two authors. One is from the University of St. Louis, and the other one from the University of Montreal. And so I encourage you to purchase a copy for your pleasure and for your enlightenment. It's a college textbook, so do be prepared for citations. My thanks to them both for a very practical and practically applicable and illuminating, certainly personally helpfully illuminating, and collegiate work. Thank you so very much. My name is Caston George. I am a monarchist, a British royalist, researcher, commentator, and archivist living in Seattle, Washington. And as always, I dedicate this video to two people, my late partner, Jaron Michael Nielsen, whom became late in 2020, pre-COVID, and my new friend, Anthony Paul Bastine of Seattle. Thank you so very much for watching.